everybody, and welcome to another episode of Connect Conversations. Today's conversation is all about Kaizen, tools for supporting reliability, and it's brought to you a part of MOBIUS Connect's ongoing YouTube series, Connect Conversations. I'm Kim Fugger, the manager of MOBIUS Connect, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First, I'd like to take a moment and introduce the host of Connect Conversations series, Global Reliability Improvement experts, Doug Plucknette and Ron Moore. Doug and Ron, are you there with me?
Yep, we're here.
I'm here.
Hello. Well, before we get started, I just want to encourage our audience here today to submit any questions that you have into the question panel of your go-to webinar screen here. And Doug and Ron will be more than happy to answer your questions throughout our time today. Again, at any time you have a question during today's discussion, just type them in. They do take a moment and we'll go over them. Any of them that don't get answered live today, they will be sure to reach out to you guys. But Doug and Ron are here to provide their expert and perspectives of their experiences and are here to help you. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and start, Doug, since you didn't beat me to it, So today we're going to be talking about Kaizen. And I think Doug would agree with this, that it's one of the more misunderstood. They're all kind of misunderstood in one form or another, but I think Kaizen and later I think we'll be talking about TPM. They're all not really well understood, and so we're going to be sharing with you our experience and our views of Kaizen and what it means and what the elements are and how to make it work for you, and maybe some of the pitfalls as well. I'm just going to start by saying, Kaizen, what is it? Well, it literally means change for the better, Kaizen. And it's come to mean continuous improvement. And I encourage folks to apply these principles and tools first before they get into TPM, RCM, RCA, and all that other stuff. I think you'll see when we're done talking that Kaizen creates what I view as organizational readiness. They're the organizational enablers, and they can assure, not only do they eliminate a bunch of problems that you don't need to apply the more advanced tools to, but they also assure stability and assure that you can sustain the results of the other improvement tools. So Kaizen creates the organizational readiness, creates the enablers, and so on. So with that, I'll turn it back to Doug, and then we'll get into some of the details.
All right. So this is one of those things that when Ron and I discuss what we're and put together a schedule, what are we going to talk about? One of my comments back to him with Kaizen was, you'll be talking a lot that day, Ron. Realistically, though, I do have some experience with it. And I also joked about the podcast today might be longer than some of the Kaizen events that I've seen at different companies, right? Yeah. And that's really because of that misunderstanding, right? And I agree with you. This is one of those early starting tools that you say, all right, what's the focus here? Well, let's get people to start working together. All right, let's start talking about how do we eliminate waste? How do we make simple and small gains in what we do? And if you can't even start doing that, what's your readiness for those other more complex things, right?
Yeah. Well, Kaizen, so what is it? It is not a single tool. It's a bucket of tools. And so what are those? Well, 5S is one of them. I'm going to list them all, and then we'll come back and discuss each one. We got 5S, 5 Whys, standard work, a visual workplace, go and see, get off your butt and go talk to the troops doing the work and find out what's really happening out there. Don't sit staring at a screen in your office. Let's see, I said quick changeover, visual workplace, and structured improvement time, meaning something to the effect of you've got a list of things you want to make right, and then once a week or maybe once a month or whatever time period is appropriate, you spend a day or half a day or whatever time is appropriate, and you resolve that issue, you solve that problem, you make that machine, that procedure, whatever it is, you make it better. So that's the bucket of tools that create that organizational readiness that we're talking about here. Doug, you have anything to add to that before I launch into 5S?
Oh, and I like your 5 definitions, and this is the thing that when we go out and we talk about these, let's call them tools, there may be different teachings that some others do, right? So,
yeah.
When I learned at Kodak, we talked about know your customer, go with the flow, go to where things happen. I think they called it go to Gemba or something similar to that.
Yep.
Empowering people and transparency, right? So it really is the focus on a number of things, and again, starting out simple, and then from there expanding on to the things that you talked about, right? 5S and 5 Ys and problem solving and the elimination of waste.
Yep. Well, let's talk about 5S first, because that's probably the one of the most misused or abused of all the tools in the Kaizen bucket. First of all, let me say this, the purpose of 5S is not housekeeping. Not. And too many people out there think that, yeah, I'm just going to clean the place up, make it tidy, and life will be better. That's not the purpose. That's a result of doing 5S. And the other thing, most of the companies that I've been around, they do 4S. They sort, straighten, scrub, and stop. And then what happens? Well, 6 months later, whoever did that thing is gone, and things have gone to hell again, and there are no standards in place, and nobody kept it that way. And yeah, we tried that here, that didn't work. Well, you didn't do all 5S's. There's 2 more: systematize and standardize, so that you sustain. And there are different variations on on what each S means. Just pick the ones you're happy with. But the key is to do things that systematize and standardize it so you sustain it. Otherwise, it'll come and go like most of these tools.
It's kind of like cleaning out the garage and not putting things where they belong, but just throwing them all out. Right?
Yeah.
Put them all in a great big pile somewhere. Like I have a friend that I used to tease him. When he cleans out the garage, he takes everything out to the shed. Right? When he takes everything out, cleans out the shed, he brings it back to the garage. Right?
He's doing 5S.
Right. Well, see, you go to a party, he's got the garage all cleaned out. It looks fantastic. You go open the door of the shed, it looks like Fred Flintstone's closet. Stuff comes falling out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, the other point too is, 5S. Let's talk about the purpose of 5S. The purpose of 5S, again, is not housekeeping. It's defect detection, defect elimination, and workplace discipline. That's the purpose. I'll say it again. It's defect detection, therefore defect elimination, and then workplace discipline so that you sustain what you've just done. So if you're going to get into 5S, you got to do all 5 S's with that purpose in mind. And by the way, when you do that, yeah, you'll have good housekeeping. Place will look good.
So 5 S's with the 3 Ds.
Yeah. Okay. You can think of it that way.
Defect elimination.
Detection, defect elimination, and workplace discipline.
Discipline. There you go.
So, do you have any other
by the way,
observations on that?
that D, the last one, is the
Yeah.
one that most places struggle with.
Yeah.
Right. Just the discipline of setting up, organizing, making sure things get done, following through, right, with what their plans are. That takes discipline.
Yeah. Well, another thing, 5S is a prerequisite for doing TPM. Now, that's not my words. That's Masaaki Imai. He's another one of those Japanese gurus. And he says, don't even bother with TPM till you've done 5S. And you have it as a common, routinely used tool within your operation. And then TPM is going to be much more effective for you, like a multiple more effective. So, all right, let's do that next 5 whys.
All right.
Now, there are lots of root cause analysis tools out there, and I'm not here to critique any one of them, or they all have their advantages and maybe a disadvantage here, there, relative to each other, but they all work, I think. But I would start with 5 whys. Now, I worked with a guy one time at a British operation, and we were talking about 5 whys, and he said, "Yeah, Ron, we've done 5 whys here." Well, we tried to. He said, "I brought a problem into my boss, and I was telling him about the problem, and he looked at me and he said, 'Why? Well, that's 5 whys, but you're supposed to wait for an answer in between each why." And so the broader point here is most simple problems can be identified and resolved with a simple 5 why approach. Well, why did that happen? Well, I don't know. Let's pretend to do one. Doug, you jump in. Maybe I don't know, a bearing failed. Well, why'd that happen? Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't think it was well balanced. Okay. Well, why'd that happen? Well, I don't know. Maybe we didn't have the right tool, or maybe production was in a dither about getting it back online. We didn't take the time to do it. But within about 3 or 4 whys, a lot of times you get to the root cause. The key is to do something about it and put a standard in place such that you sustain it. So, 5 whys, and another thing about 5 whys is it's really easy to do. You don't have to go through 2 or 3 days of training to do 5 whys. You can just start practicing it today and just get people accustomed to practicing it. And you do have to have a certain amount of discipline and a certain amount of follow-up and that sort of thing. But 5 whys is just, well, that's easy. And the rest of the tools are really good. I'm not saying you shouldn't have those, but do 5 why first. And then if it evolves into something that's maybe more complex or has some legal implications, or it's a major disaster, then you ought to go back and use something that's a little more sophisticated. But for most small routine stuff, 5 why is just a super tool. And it's both 5S and 5 why, and all these tools are really great for engaging the entire workforce, because they don't require to become a green belt or a blue belt or whatever. You can just, for the most part, you can just go with them. Doug, back to you.
Well, when you look at 5 whys, and it does, I hear people criticize the 5 whys that it's too simple, it's not detailed enough, and I tell them, well, I want you to look at your problems, right, and the ones that you've solved in the past, and go through 5 whys and tell me whether or not that would have solved it, right? And in most cases, the answer is yes. And then I also tell them, all right, so after you solved problem A, right, did you go back through your chain of whys and mitigate each one? And they'll look at you confused. They go, most people only focus on that last why that they got to, that they say, well, it didn't get lubricated because we didn't have the lubricant, right? Okay, but there was 3 other steps in there that, as that problem branches off, if you eliminate one of those at the beginning, the other ones go away.
Yeah.
Right. So
or if you do 2 or 3 of them, the likelihood of that ever happening again is
it's
really low.
exactly.
So, you know, again, I think you should have some of the more sophisticated tools out there, and there are lots of good ones, but start with 5Y.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work for you, then yeah, jump down and use the one that's a little more advanced for your purpose. Okay, let's do maybe standard work. Well, that goes back to, the 5 S's and to the 5 Y's, because standard work, once you identify or get a system in place, you've got to standardize that. So that's just part of routine business. That's just how you do things. That imposes a certain amount of discipline. So, having standards that you apply to the work will assure greater consistency in the work and will minimize the need to use Six Sigma as an analysis tool. In fact, you'll reduce a tremendous amount of variation if you do things like, just for instance, if every shift runs the process exactly the same way. They all use the same set points. They all use the same startup and shutdown procedures. They all communicate with each other on shift handover about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, get every shift to run the process, like every other shift. Now, you may identify something where you need to improve it. Well, great. Use that, promulgate it through all the other shifts, and then that's your new standard for running the process. So standard work doesn't mean you fix it and it's locked forever. It just means you have a set of standards that you're applying, and simultaneously you're looking for ways to improve those standards, and then you ratchet up, and that's your new standard. So another one, might be every machine gets balanced or aligned to a specific standard. Now, that standard may vary with the speed of the machine, the criticality of the machine, and so on, but you've got a standard that you're applying. Or every lube oil might be filtered to a particular standard, and that too may vary depending on the machine, the criticality, and so on. So standard work is really, really important to reduce variation and get consistency and apply to 5S and 5Ys. Doug, do you have other observations?
The amazing observation that I have with that, Ron, is we work with companies that have assets that are worth millions of dollars, right? And when you start talking to them about standard operating procedures, it's just standards, right? You kind of get the high eyes, right? And I'll never forget that, all 3 of my children worked at McDonald's here locally, right? And when I get talking about this one particular time, I'm just on the phone with somebody. After the conversation, my son comes in and he goes, "We have standards at McDonald's on how to make the burger," right? So here we are, we're asking kids that are making a minimum wage job, going out there in a service organization, and they're being asked to work to a standard so it's made the same way every time. Now, why would they go out and they do that, right? Would it happen to be quality? Would it happen to make sure that every customer gets the same thing every time, right? That
Yeah.
The key ingredients are there in each one. That is cooked properly so people don't get sick, so safety is considered. So organizations that are, working on small profit margins understand the importance of that. And then there's these other places where we work where they give you high eyes and holy smokes, they're paying their operator $32 an hour, but they have no expectation of this is how you properly start it up. This is how you shut it down. This is how you're going to go about doing product change. Here's how you make sure that case erector makes the boxes right consistently over and over again, that you don't have jams and so on.
Yeah. Well, just my observation on that is no matter where you go in the U.S. or for that matter, the world, you're going to get the same ordinary burger. No offense to you guys that like McDonald's, but I'm not a big fan. I think I make a better burger on my grill. But
I think
but
I do as well.
it's going to be the same, right? There is consistency in the quality, and it is a good quality product. Anyways, enough said on that before I get in trouble here. So let's see. Let's talk about go and see. Get off your butt. Go out into the workplace. Talk to the guys. Look around. See what the hell is going on. I can't tell you how many operations I've been in where I look around and I say to myself and whoever my host is, your executives could not be walking through this plant. They could not be, because they would be appalled at what I'm seeing, and they would have to see it. Yeah, you just see trash laying around. You just see leaks. You just see stuff not labeled. You just see all this bad stuff. Okay. So get up, go talk to the guys, find out what's going on, find out what they think that you need to do, explain to them, either get them involved in doing it or explain to them why you can't do that right now, but make a list of things that you're going to go back to your staff and you're going to say, well, what are we going to do about this, guys? So go and see. And don't use, if you do this, don't use it as a club. Use it as an opportunity to engage the workforce, to get them involved in, developing, supplying, participating in creating solutions. Because if you use it at a club, they're not going to be cooperative the next time you come trolling through. If you use it as an opportunity and you use it to praise them on what a good job they've done, letting you know about these things, then they'll be much more likely to engage in routine things, that because they know something's going to happen, or if it doesn't, they know you'll tell them why it didn't happen. So I think that's, back when I was president of CSI, I used to just walk around and talk to folks, and you'd be surprised what you might find out. And then you once you find out, you can go back to your guys and say, did you know this? What do you think we ought to do about that? Use the Socratic approach. Don't go back and say, did you know this? Damn it, you better get that fixed or I'm going to have your ass. I don't know if I can say that or not, but anyways, don't do that. That doesn't motivate people to work with you. All right, I'll pause there and let Doug have a word.
That reminds me of a couple stories that I could tell. One was from when I was a journeyman pipe fitter and working in our plant that made motion picture and graphic arts film. And we had a problem with the feed line to one of the film machines that was stuffing up, right? And when you work on them, you've only got so many minutes to figure out what that problem is, get that flow back running before you shut that machine down. And people think, oh, well, that's probably not that big a deal. Well, it all depends on how long it's shut down for, right? And this particular area, if I didn't get it, they're going to be a couple hours, which means it's going to go cold. And then you're probably better than a day or so to get it back up and running. So I got this line apart, and as a result, there's crap all over the floor, right? The department manager comes through and he says, oh my gosh, you got a mess out here. The vice president's going to be coming through here in an hour, 20 minutes or whatever. You got to get this cleaned up. And I said to him, well, I guess we got a choice to make. Would you rather tell him that one of the machines went down so that it would look nice and clean for when he came through, or would you rather have the machine running and explain to him that, hey, when we go through here, there's going to be a bit of a mess, but rather than have the machine go down, we thought we'd have this guy take care of it and fix it, right? He stopped it. He says, I think there's a different way I can take him. I said, good choice, right?
Or hell, bring him by.
Yeah.
Like I said, too many executives get led through what they, you wouldn't do that to me. I'm
Yeah.
going to go where I want to go. You're not going to lead me what you want me to see,
There you
but
go.
that's just
So,
me. Yeah.
but I agree with the thing with the club, because I worked with a client in the last couple of years that it's just a pigsty, right? And I try with the first thing you need to do is get the place cleaned up. It's not even 5S, it's just a mess, right? And the manager there kind of makes a face at me. He says, if we start there, we won't get any help. And I said, well, can I just give you my thoughts on why I'm saying this and what I think might be the approach to start? And he says, go ahead. I said, in the past, bosses have just come through and they've told you the place is a mess, clean it up, right? He says, yeah. And I said, you get beat down about that every time they come through. Yeah. And I said, and so you're trying to clean the whole plant. Mm-hmm. I said, where's the worst leak? Start there, right? And he says, what are you saying? I said, try to do the whole thing, it'll never happen. Start someplace, do something, right? But measure what you're doing, right? How much of that junk you sweep up off the floor and throw away? He says, I don't know. Start measuring it, right? Whether you've got to weigh it or whether it's by volume, measure it, right? I think it gets measured. We can then understand what our progress is. Is it getting worse or is it getting better?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yep.
that's what most places lose sight of. I mean, even waste is measurable, right? Stuff that's falling on the floor, it's a mess. How much did we have to pick up? What was it last week? What is it this week? Are we making progress? Right.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to start seeing is just show me some progression. Show me that we're getting better.
Yeah. Well, just one closing, maybe a little war story or two on go and see. I was at, let's say, I won't tell you what metal, but let's just say it was a metals plant, a rolling mill. And there was one central location that all the sheet metal passed through. And at that location, they did a bunch of things, coating and some other things. And it was just horrid looking. So I went back to the site manager and I said, come here, I want to show you something. And I walked him out to that one location. And I said, now everything you make passes through here. And the quality of it and so on is dependent on what happens here. I said, what do you think I think about the state of this location? I don't think he'd been out there in months. Anyways, he took it to heart. And another guy there was a huge compressor that was, if it went down, the whole site went down. And I walked him out to that compressor and there was hydraulic leaks and the place was just a rat hole. And I said, now that's the machine that keeps your site running. Does it look like it's been loved? Well, of course not. But get your butt out there and go look and go see. Don't use it as a club. Use it as an opportunity to go talk to your folks and find out what they can do to help you to change it. Go and see and talk and act. Okay, next one. Quick changeover. Well, SMED, single minute exchange of die, that's particularly important, I think, when you're worried about product changeovers. And there are folks out there who do this. They'll take 2 or 3 video cameras, take a bunch of videos, and then you sit down, you work your way through it. And you say, well, what could we do beforehand so we minimize the changeover time? What could we do in parallel? What's the critical path? What are any special tools or anything else we need to do to reduce that changeover time? And I think if you do that, the studies I've read and the folks I've talked to said, first time you do it, you probably cut your time in half. And then you do it again, maybe 2 or 3 months later after you've learned some things, and you probably cut your time in half again. And you may even do it again. but you can just dramatically reduce the changeover time if it's important to you. If production is really important, you can reduce your changeover time by applying those principles and those tools. And personally, I think those same principles apply to maintenance. How long does a pump repair take? Oh, I don't know, 4 days. Well, could you do it in 4 hours? And everybody just rolls their eyes and if it's important enough to you, you'll figure it out. How long does it take to change a tire? Oh, half an hour. Could you do it in 7 seconds? Well, NASCAR does. Now, I'm not saying you need to change tires in 7 seconds, but they do, because every fraction of a second is worth thousands of dollars to them. So you have to do a little bit of a business case here. Doug, do you have any comments on quick changeover?
Yeah, especially in the widget business, which I have had a ton of customers in food and beverage, and they struggle with this. And it's typically not the container the product's put in, but it's the container that they put the product in, the box or the case or whatever, right? They'll get really good at, filling bottles of beer or bottles of soda or, this little plastic things full of yogurt, you name it. Then they go to put it in the box and well, we're jamming it up, putting it in the boxes, or we don't have enough boxes, or we got to start a half hour ahead of time and make up a bunch of boxes in advance. And you go, all right, where's your bottleneck? The bottleneck's obviously the boxes. You got to focus your time there, right? Use a little bit of discipline, use a little bit of, that common sense to say, where's that bottleneck? Start working on it, right? And apply your 5 S's there. And there's lots of things that we can do. Well, you see, what happens is that there's always an excuse that comes along. Marketing will like to change the package that it comes in every, year and a half or so. All right, so you've got some challenges to work around. Before that particular change is made and put in place, you need to come up with a way of how did we make it right for this one, so that when the next one comes along, we might follow that same process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, people just don't think about it. They just muddle along, struggle along until, somebody asks the question, about changeovers or could you do it faster? I was at an operation one time where they had this enormous steam leak. It had been that way for, I don't know, a year, 2 years. I don't know how many thousands of dollars. We're not talking about a little bitty leak, where you get a little bitty thing like this. We're talking about a thing that's blowing out 10, 15
roaring.
feet.
Yeah,
and it's roaring, 120 decibels when you get, and the guy said, well, it's going to take 3 or 4 days to change it. I said, could you do it in 6 hours? And he thought I'd been, smoking something I shouldn't have been smoking or something. I said, I'm just asking because I suspect if you set your mind to it, you would figure out how to get it done in a lot less time than 4 days if the business case is there. And you've blown away, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars so far. So, do your analysis, sort it out, put a team on it, and get that damn thing fixed. It just irritated me every time I go back there. The leak could still be there, and it just hurt my Scottish blood. So, what do we got in the visual workplace? Or any other comments on that one, Doug?
Visual workplace, which we see most often are those shadow boards, right?
Yeah.
Where they'll put tools up for doing the things like product change that I talked about. And I wish I could say that every shadow board I saw had all the spaces filled.
Yeah. Well, visual workplace. Let me give you a philosophical view of a visual workplace. I should be able to walk through any operation that's out there and know immediately where the problems are, whether or not the process is running well, And if there is a problem, it should be obvious to me, even if I know bupkis about your plant, your process, and so on. So that's the philosophy behind having visual systems, is you want to make it easy for the guy doing the work to identify when things aren't working right. And so you've got gauges that are color coded, with the red, green, yellow, whatever it may be. You've got valves that are labeled as to what function they have, what's open and what's shut. You've got pipes colored or with colored arrows on them with a direction of flow, so people know, whether it's right or wrong. And yeah, you've got shadow boards and you've got boxes and you got all that stuff, because again, you want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. And you want to make it hard for them to do the wrong thing. And if you have nice visual systems, it'll be easy for folks to do the right thing. Doug, any other observations on that?
Can you have too much of it?
I've never seen it. Maybe you can.
It just comes to mind an auto plant that I used to do work in that, they had bulletin boards with charts, and I kid you not, these things were, let's just say, more than a full sheet of plywood. So sometimes 3 or 4 of them put together, right? So, right, and it's just filled. Right, and so the people that I'm working on the team, we'd walk down the hall, going maybe from one conference room or out to see the equipment or just little tours, and I'd stop and I'd say, "What's that mean right there?" Right, and you get to look at it. That's your line. That's the line you work on. What's that? Says that right at the top, and it's your line. What's it mean? So the information that's posted has to be relevant.
Okay. Yeah.
Folks that do the work, right? Sometimes we tend to put stuff up for the wrong people, right? Put things up that are relevant to the folks that are out there doing the work, so that they understand where they're at, where we're going, and what our progress is.
Let's see, we got a question here, Doug. Well, let me make a comment on what you just said. Then I'll read the question and we'll try to answer it. One of the things I recommend to folks is don't have more than about 5 measures in any given area or for any given purpose. Because if you have, like you just described, 25, nobody's going to care. And nobody's going to keep it up to date. And it's just going to be a complex maze that people just don't bother with. So it has to be simple. Otherwise, it gets lost. So just to echo what you just said. The question here, if Kaizen focuses on eliminating waste, improving productivity, improving activities and processes of an organization, it seems awfully close to reliability engineering. Well, yeah, you could say that. You could make that argument easily. So I would go with that. Doug, do you have a comment on that? And I'll let it sink for a bit.
I agree, and it tends to be, people tend to treat it as a program, right? And I tell them, you'll see they'll go out and they'll work on one machine, and they'll clean it, and they'll set it straight, they'll realign it, they'll organize it, right? And then they move on to the next thing, right? And you try to explain to them that, okay, that's all well and good, but if you want to sustain what you did on machine number 1, right, that should be your primary focus. It's not just to make it better for a few minutes or a few days or a few months. Make that gain and sustain that gain, right?
Yeah. Well, so that goes back to the issue of standard work.
Sure.
Right. I did have one caveat to, it's the same sort of thing, but let me tell you what I often see Okay, that would be a contrast between reliability engineering and Kaizen. Kaizen engages the entire workforce in those simple tools. And what I often see with reliability engineering is it's a tiny segment within the organization of 3 or 4 guys doing those similar kinds of things that the questioner has asked, but it's not necessarily what promulgated to engage the entire workforce. And there's nothing wrong with that. Reliability engineers tend to be narrowly focused on a particular issue or problem, but Kaizen is much more broadly cast, applying the same principles throughout the plant. So I hope that answers the question. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm a person that says if you're doing that with your reliability engineers, you might not be utilizing them in their best manner, right? That and it comes from the upbringing. I came from a site and a company that we started. Our focus was fully on OEE and defect elimination, and whatever we could do to do that, right? Whether it was defect elimination through root cause analysis, RCM, through procedure-based maintenance, and so on, right? If anything, we were probably too maintenance and engineering focused, and probably not broad enough. And that might be the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Is we should have encouraged more participation from the operations side of the business, from quality, from safety, those folks as well.
Yeah. So yeah, with that caveat, I mean they're applying the same sorts of principles. Just
Sure.
Like I said, to give you a little the guy whoever asked the question. By the way, I use the term guy to mean it's a non-gender specific term in my world because I've got four girls and 2 boys, and I call them guys. You guys knock it off, that sort of thing. But anyways. Just so I don't get in trouble, so where was I going with that? Well, I've forgotten now. Oh yeah, here's a little factoid for you. The folks who study this, Bob Kelleher, he's a super duper guy. He studies workforce engagement. And what he says and sees it repeated year on year is that about 20% of your workforce is truly engaged. That is, they come to work looking forward to work. They're always kind of proactive out there looking for problems to solve. They really are engaged. About 30% of the workforce is truly engaged. About 50% of the workforce is not. They're kind of disengaged. Now, they do the minimum because they don't want to get fired, but there's not much enthusiasm, there's not much proactive activity. They're kind of, disengaged. And about 20% of the workforce is actively disengaged. And, they're probably the ne'er-say-wells, ne'er-do-wells, always grousing, looking for ways to get out of work, that sort of thing. So now think about the implications of that relative to your workforce productivity. So the real issue ought to be, what can we do to get that other 70% of the workforce engaged, truly engaged? And we might not ever get them all, but if we got 3 more, man, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? If we got one of those guys to go from actively disengaged to fully engaged, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? And I really think that Kaizen is really a tool that's focused on engaging the entire workforce. So let's see the last bit here, structured improvement time. Well, we touched on that earlier. Structured improvement time isn't just something you do once and you're done. It's something you do routinely. It's a forever thing. In fact, Kaizen and all these tools that we've been discussing, it's a forever thing. It's not a project. It's not something you do once and golly, thank goodness that's over. It's something that becomes part of your ethos, part of your culture within the organization. And so structured improvement time would be, like I said earlier, once a week, you'd set aside a half a day, once a month, maybe a day, and it may be 2 days, it might be 2 hours, you would structure your improvement time to address the particular issues. And you would have a whole bucket full, of things out there that you want to address. And you would selectively go through those based on their priority and the urgency of getting them done. And you would add others to it as they came along and give them a different priority. It's a fairly dynamic thing, but it's structured. And you're also going to have folks who facilitate it. Because if you don't have some focal point to help lead it and assure that things get done and get put in place, it probably won't happen. If it's just supposed to be some sort of, organic thing that just happens, probably not. Doug, you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, and that really, the biggest piece behind that is to give people the time and the opportunity to speak up, right? And be involved in those things. You brought up earlier the NASCAR example of changing a tire, right?
Yeah.
It probably takes the average person today with the junky stuff that they put in your trunk or underneath the
yeah, you got to find the spare first.
It's going to take you better than an hour, right? And they're doing it in 7 seconds, right? So that continuous improvement took multiple people. I'm sure it wasn't just one guy that kept saying, hey, I think maybe we do this next, or maybe we do this next, maybe we do this next. Holy smokes, they got that big nut glued on there. That spare that comes in, it's not like you're taking the ones off and putting them on another one and having to do those all up. And where's the jack located and who's going to do that, right? It comes from letting people communicate what their ideas are, listening to them, then facilitating that as you spoke to. Right? It's saying, all right, how do we make this improvement? It really comes down to listen to those people. In those numbers that you spoke to before on people, the 30% that are actively engaged, 50% that aren't really that engaged, but they're doing their job, and then the other ones. What you really have to worry about is that last percentage you talked about.
Yeah.
They will actively work to take that other percentage with them.
Yeah.
And the top ones, they're just perfectly happy to be there with each other.
Yeah.
Typically.
Well, the analogy I use is you got 10 guys in a rowboat, a crew. Mm-hmm. 3 guys are tugging on the oars, man, they're working hard. 5 guys are sightseeing, and 2 guys are trying to sink your boat. So it's really important to use these tools. Now all these individual tools that we've been discussing, they interact with each other. So these are not little independent pieces that you can go apply, although you will apply them independently from time to time. They all get tied back into things like standard work. Some of them are prompted by go and see. Some of them will prompt structured improvement time and so on. So they all, kind of are part of a system associated with continuous improvement that you then have to apply the appropriate tool and link it to whatever else is within the system of tools that you put in place.
All right, we have another question.
Okay.
Some organizations found themselves implementing Gemba sessions as an exercise of finding nonconformance or violation committed by personnel or departments, resulting in potential fault-finding culture. What are your thoughts on this, ensuring Gemba is implemented correctly?
Well, if you don't implement it correctly, it'll be what we talked about earlier. Don't use this as a club. If you use it as a club, it will not be well received by the workforce, and you'll put more people in the back of the boat trying to sink it as opposed to in the front of the boat trying to tug on the oars.
Yep.
So you know, I think, you know, whoever asked that question knew the answer to it before they asked it. So the answer is pretty obvious. Don't use
Yeah.
this stuff as a club. It has to be used in a positive sense to engage the workforce in making the improvements, and then thanking them and bragging on them and asking them what else they see out there to reinforce, get your continuous improvement and that virtuous circle, as they call it, going. So,
Right. So,
all righty.
Interesting piece of this, and you talked about 5 pieces. I talked about 5, and one of the interesting things that I've always said that is missed from this is the old "what's in it for me," right?
Yeah.
And that's an important piece of this from the get-go, is to let people know, right? What's in it for me? What's in it for you? Right? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Right? And how are we going to reward those that participate? Are there going to be goals involved? Right? If we eliminate waste, or if we improve productivity, or if we save money,
Yeah.
right? What's in it for those that participate and go along and become people that are actively rowing that crew, right?
Yeah. Well, there are all kinds of benefits or rewards, if you want to call it that. But and sometimes it's not always money. Sometimes it's having a smoother, less hassle-free workplace.
Yep.
Sometimes it's being appreciated for the contribution you're making with a simple thank you. Sometimes it's in sharing the gains, having some sort of profit sharing or gain sharing process. But I think it has to incorporate all of those things. There has to be an environment created where people feel appreciated and respected and so on, but there also has to be some maybe minor rewards, less stress, less hassle, all that sort of thing, and then maybe even some monetary rewards. So, and it's going to depend on the context and the circumstance. We tried. I don't know, I can't say that we were successful at all times and for all the people, but we tried to have that balance of, the that show people respect and appreciation right up through the spectrum of having monetary gains shared amongst the workforce back in my day. But that was a long time ago. I still think people need to do that. That has a universal application.
All right, Ron, we are pretty close to our time here.
All right. Well, let me kind of tell you what I told you at the beginning. Okay. It's the old military approach to things. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So just again, Kaizen is about continuous improvement, and it's a bucket of tools. It's not just one thing you do. And it's a great tool for engaging the entire workforce in defect elimination, in process improvement, and then, creating all the things we've been talking about, standard work, for example, quick changeover, visual workplace, and that sort of thing. So, and it's a prerequisite for getting into TPM. And 5S, do all 5, link that into standard work and so on. So, Kaizen creates the organizational readiness, the organizational discipline. It's the enabler for moving into some of the more advanced tools and solving simple problems that engage the entire workforce. So with that note, I'll turn it back to Doug. You got any closing remarks?
Yes, I do. This is the tool, and I tell companies when I go to work for them, please don't be insulted when I say sometimes it's best to go back to square one, right? And Kaizen is a great square one tool. And the biggest thing for me with it is this is where you're going to find your leaders, right? This is the tool that's going to help you pick them out, because it's starting with that I call it the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. This is really something simple that we can say, let's find where our waste is. Let's find where our defects are. Let's do those 5 Ys. Let's do that 5S. And those leaders will naturally come forward. You're going to be able to very easily pick them out to say, all right, when we go to the more complex things, who are the people that can lead, have the capabilities to lead those efforts? And you'll be able to pick them out.
All righty. Well, I reckon we've wasted another hour of everybody's time. So I hope you got some good out of it. And we appreciate you joining us, and hope you can join us for the next one. I think, what's the next one on? TPM?
I think our next one is TPM.
Yeah. So we hope to, hear from everybody then. And signing off.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
And to everybody out there.